Donalyn Miller, and this is the Book Whisperer, Back to the Books. This week, I would like to talk to you about book talking. You know, when I was a new teacher, I assigned my students book reports because my colleagues convinced me that if I did not tie an assignment to every act of reading that students did, they wouldn't read, and I believed that for a period of time. But what I noticed early on was that I had many students who did not do much reading at all until right before the burning deadline for that book report. And then they would fly down to the library, check out the shortest book they could find. I got a lot of reports on Sarah Plain and Tall that year. And they would read enough of the book to be able to finish the report. Notice I did not say finish the book. Take the grade, and then go back to not reading again. So I didn't see that as successful. Many of us years ago moved away from book reports and moved to book talks. You know, the goal of a book report is to prove to someone that you read a book, but the goal of a book talk is to persuade other readers to read your book. And so I implemented book talks, but we took that book talking idea and we turned it right back into a book report again. We gave kids a rubric. We had all these requirements and expectations for those book talks, literary elements they had to include. We required them to bring in things like props. And then we shut down our classrooms for 3 days while kid after kid comes up to the front and says things like, I read Hatchet. My favorite part was at the end. I can't tell you. You know, my students may have read 6,700 books in a year, but they only read about 1,900 unique titles. In any grading period, I might have had 10 kids reading Hatchet at the same time. If you're that kid doing that 10th Hatchet report, you're looking for anything new to say about Hatchet. And if you're a student in the classroom who hasn't read Hatchet, by the time that 10th report, my students may have read 6,700 books in a year, but they only read about 1,900 unique titles. I may have had 10 students in my classroom during one grading period all reading Hatchet. If you're that 10th student doing a Hatchet book report, you're looking for anything new to say about Hatchet. And if you're a student in the classroom who hasn't read Hatchet, by the time we reach that 10th report, you no longer want to. So if the goal of a book talk is to encourage other readers to read your book, that practice may in fact be doing the opposite. So how can we take that idea of the book talk, persuading other readers to read your book, and change it in a way that makes it more spontaneous, more low risk for students, and where it happens more often? Well, first, we would like to start with teachers doing book talks in the classroom. This does not need to be a dog and pony show. You don't have to write a script. You don't have to get props unless that makes you happy. And then I encourage you to do that. But I think those organic, heartfelt testimonials about a book have just as much power in exciting kids about reading them. Imagine if you did a book talk every single day in your classroom, one book, 2 to 3 minutes. Students would hear almost 180 books in a school year. Now let's take it to the next level. Librarians doing regular book talks when students visit the library. Let's take it to the next level. Administrators giving book talks over the announcements, inviting classrooms to share their favorite books, or inviting in staff members or community members to share their favorite books. Think about how many books children would hear about in a year. We know that if we could only make one change in the classroom that took less than 5 minutes, that would have a powerful influence on our students' attitudes about books and their awareness of the types of books that are available for them to read, it would be to implement regular book talking. What we want is to create a book talking culture at a school. Now, ultimately, we want all the adults in the school modeling book talking and recommending books to children. But no matter how knowledgeable we are about the types of books that are available for our students to read, the best person to give a book recommendation to a seventh grader is another seventh grader. And so we want our students to be engaged in book talking themselves. Inviting students on a regular basis to share their favorite books builds a culture of reading in the classroom that involves all students, and it puts students' voices front and center in the classroom. Every episode of the Book Whisperer, Back to the Books includes 4 or 5 book talks on great books I think you and your students would love to read, and certainly would like to share some book talks with you in our book talking episode. So I have 4 books to share with you this week. The first book I'd like to share is Ugly Cat and Pablo by Isabel Quintero. You may know Isabel Quintero's name because her debut novel, Gabby, Girl in Pieces, won the 2015 Morris Award for a debut YA fiction novel. It also earned 5-star reviews. But this is an early reader book for younger readers, early elementary school, first, second, third graders. And it's a silly story about a pair of friends, Ugly Cat and his mouse friend Pablo, and they want an ice pop. They're looking for an ice pop, and they see a girl in a park who is eating an ice pop, and they try to steal it from her. But this girl is no pushover. She doesn't let them steal the ice pop from her, and she decides that Pablo would be the perfect snack for her pet snake, so she tries to capture him. And this sets Ugly Cat and Pablo on a whole adventure where we're trying to rescue Pablo and save him from this girl. The next book I'd like to share with you is Moon Girl and the Devil Dinosaur by Amy Reeder, Brandon Montclair, Natasha Bustos, and Tamara Von Villen. This is a collection of the first 6 episodes in the Marvel comic with Moon Girl, and I know you're going to want to introduce her to your students. She's charming, she's silly, she's in some ways a typical teen, in some ways not. She has an inhuman gene which promises to give her some sort of special powers over the course of her life, although she doesn't fully have control of what that might be. And she loves science. She conducts laboratory experiments. Her parents are dismayed that she doesn't act what they see as normal. They're very protective of her. And during one of her experiments, she accidentally teleports a dinosaur into her world, and she feels responsible for capturing this dinosaur. She doesn't want it harmed. She actually develops kind of a relationship with this dinosaur as it's marching through town, tearing down buildings, wrecking the school. So action packed, fun, and a great introduction to a wonderful heroine. The next book I'd like to share with you is one of my favorite books from 2016, The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. In this book, we meet a village that is being tormented by a witch, and every year the villagers take the youngest child born into their village and set them out into the woods as a sacrifice for this witch. Um, it devastates the town. It creates so much sorrow on their families. And as we're reading the book, we learn that there is a witch. And she does come every year, but she's not coming to steal the children. She's coming to rescue them. She travels across a wasteland every year to collect these babies. She doesn't understand why this village is setting their babies out into the woods. How could they be so cruel? So she takes these babies and she travels with them across a wasteland to another village where she brings these children in as foundlings where they're adopted and loved. And these children are known as the Star Children. And one time, our witch hero actually rescues a baby, and as she's traveling across the wasteland, she's not maternal, she doesn't know much about taking care of babies. She usually keeps the babies alive by feeding them starlight, but she gets distracted and she accidentally feeds this baby moonlight. And the moonlight fills the girl with powers that she will not know how to control for many years. And so the witch decides that she must keep this child as her own and raise her so she can protect her and teach her how to use her magic. She names this young girl Luna for the moon, and we meet this motley family of our witch and a bog monster and a tiny dragon who wishes he was large. It's a beautiful story, and it has a lot of what we love in our great fantasy stories, great world building, um, clever heroines, wonderful creatures. I think it would be a delightful selection for your students. The last book I'll share with you this week is the first book in an exciting new science fiction series by legendary author Neal Shusterman. No one builds worlds like Neal Shusterman, and he doesn't disappoint in this latest series. The first book in the Arc of Scythe series is titled Scythe, and in this book we are introduced to a future world that has turned over control of its governments and all of its programs to what we would call the cloud, but which what they call the Thunderhead. The Thunderhead runs all the governments. It has eradicated war. It has eradicated disease. It has eradicated famine and a lot of sources of human suffering. But our population on Earth continues to grow. And so a secret order of assassins known as the Scythes are charged with gleaning a certain percentage of the population every year. And that each Scythe has their own personal style, their own personal training, and their own criteria for determining who will be selected to be gleaned. And in this first book of the series, we meet Citra and Rowan, two teens who um, reluctantly become apprentices to a scythe, where they must compete for one spot as a scythe by the end of the year. The book is action packed, the world building is fascinating. You'll enjoy meeting these characters, and also there's quite a bit about political intrigue and how society treats the scythes while they also still recognize the need for them. Thank you for joining me for Book Whisperer Back to the Books. I hope you'll try out some book talking with your students and encourage them to share their favorite books with each other. Let's create a book talking culture at every school. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.